This video is going to dive deeper into the criticisms and controversy of gacha games. To quickly recap what gacha games are. A gacha game is a video game that uses the gacha mechanic named after the gachapon toy vending machine. Gacha games entice players to get random items, characters, or cards for the game's virtual world using in-game currency. This kind of currency can be obtained through gameplay or buying it with real-world money. The main issues with gacha is that they're exploitative and essentially gambling. Some game developers also intentionally introduce emotional manipulations and exploitative practices. Data from the University of Michigan and the C.S. Mott Children's Hospital suggests that these advertisements prey on children's weaknesses in attention control and impulse inhibition, and the fact that children are known to develop trusting, emotional parasocial relationships with media characters. Another dataset, according to a data scientist from Yokozuna Data, states that 2% of players generate approximately 50% of the revenue when free-to-play game developers structure their products around pulling the most vulnerable players in to generate a large percentage of their revenue. The controversial freemium business model becomes extremely exploitive and unethical. Entrapped in games designed to induce addictions, people who spend enormous amounts of money on free-to-play games are known within the industry as whales. Similar to traditional gambling, microtransactions have the ability to ruin lives, especially for the younger generations who are exposed early on to the concept of gambling. The first action taken against these games was in May 2012 when a Japanese newspaper, the Yomiuri Shimbun, wrote an article criticizing gacha for exploiting the naivety of children for profit. The article's issue with gacha focused on how similar it was to gambling. The paper also asked Japan's Consumer Affairs Agency to investigate these games to make sure the power of these systems weren't being abused. The investigation resulted in the Consumer Affairs Agency declaring the model of complete gacha illegal. An article published on Game Developers blog states Kompu Gacha or Complete Gacha is a system that strongly incentivizes the gacha monetization method. Gacha is similar to a prize vending machine at a carnival. You pay a small amount of money to receive an item at random. Kompu Gacha expands on this mechanic by offering players an extremely valuable grand prize for completing a set of gacha prizes. Since the gacha prizes are awarded at random, it's very hard to get these grand prizes. If you do the math, they can be worth hundreds of dollars each on average. The agency viewed gacha games not abiding by the law for preventing unjustifiable extras or unexpected benefit and misleading representation. This law regards businesses displaying their product and/or services in various advertisements for consumers in order to increase sales and profits. In addition, prizes may be attached to the sale. However, if the display is unreasonable, false, or exaggerated, or the prizes are excessive, fair competition will be hindered and consumers will have an adverse effect on the choice of products and services. The prize labeling law aims to protect the environment in which consumers can properly select products and services by regulating unfair labeling and excessive prizes and ensuring fair competition. With that law in mind, the agency said these virtual items should now be considered as prizes to prevent complete gacha practice. After the agency's statement, complete gacha rules from all major Japanese game publishers' games were removed, yet developers found ways around this. In an article on Eurogamer states, in the wake of this ban, major mobile game developers, Gree and DNA, both of which saw share prices freefall as a result of the law, set up their own trade body, Japan Social Game Association, in hope self-regulation would head off government regulation. The trade body encouraged companies to publish their probability ratios, striving to regulate and control Japan's social gaming industry. This may sound like a great option, but companies still found a way to use gacha mechanics, and the body dissolved in 2015. Despite the Kompu Gacha ban and the threat of regulation, Japanese developers still make money hand over fist with loot boxes and gacha. In other words, some forms of gacha and loot boxes are still legal, and players are still spending insane amounts of money on Japanese mobile games, which use them. After all, this legislation, one player was still able to spend $6,065 in one night on Cygames' Grand Blue Fantasy in 2016. As a result, Cygames apologized and refunded players, implementing its own self-regulation on all its social games, which capped the amount players could spend on gacha mechanics. If government does move to tackle loot boxes, it needs to ensure the legislation is airtight, or developers will work around it, as seen in China. In 2017, it became law for publishers in China to promptly publicly announce information about the name, property, content, quantity, and draw probability of all virtual items and services. In other words, game publishers needed to tell players in China the probability to get certain virtual items. At the same time, the law also banned game publishers from directly selling lottery tickets, such as loot boxes. Again, companies found a way around this, with the Blizzard China changing the way loot boxes are purchased. To bypass the law in China, Overwatch players cannot directly buy loot boxes. Instead, you purchase the in-game currency with real-life money for roughly the same price and get loot boxes as a gift. This just reverses the original system, as currency tends to come in loot boxes anyway, but it was completely legal. Gacha games are still relatively new to the video game market, which is why any regulations are still being figured out. Though regulations in places such as Japan and China have been made, there are clear holes in them that allow developers to find loopholes. It will be interesting to see the future progress of regulations for these games and how long it takes to get there.